My name is Joyce Tofte. My pronouns are she, her mix. I work at Southwest Minnesota State University in the Office of University Public Safety. I also work for New Horizons Crisis Center, which is a crime victims advocacy center that covers multiple counties in Southwest Minnesota, and we handle general crime and sexual violence. I'm also the co-founder of the MORE Network, which is an anti-racism nonprofit that covers 13 counties in Southwest Minnesota, and I am the co-chair of the City of Marshall's DEI Commission.
There you go. So one of the things that we've talked about is the fact that lack of housing is at the root of a lot of things, and I heard the exact same thing in Brainerd, and when I was down in Rochester for a town hall meeting last week, the first question that was by so many different people was related to housing. Housing relates to individual stability, community safety, having some place to go on re-entry from prison, having some place to go to leave an abuser. So from your perspective in Greater Minnesota, what do you see as the needs that are not being met? It's kind of a big question, but...
Yeah, for sure. So one of the narratives that kind of exists is that the needs for Greater Minnesota and rural Minnesota are different than urban Minnesota, and that's not true. Like just humans as a whole, we have the exact same needs. We have the needs for accessible and affordable healthcare. We have the needs for our identities being validated and represented. We have the needs for access to good education, clean water, environmental safety. We have the same needs. The difference is sometimes the barriers to accessing those needs might be different, rural versus metropolitan. But the needs are the same. So the same conversations that we have in the Twin Cities area are the same conversations that we're having in rural America. One of the biggest barriers to access for our area in regards to getting resources to help move initiatives is just we're forgettable. I'm just gonna call a spade, Like anyone in the crowd, raise your hand if you've been to Worthington, Minnesota. Love it for us. Keep your hands up if you've been to Marshall, Minnesota. Love it. Keep your hands up if you've been to Wilmer, Minnesota. Sweet. So I'm naming the big ones. Hands up if you've been to Garvin, Minnesota. Hands up if you've been to Island, Minnesota. Ahlen. Hands up if you've been to Candy, Ojai. Not the county, the city. Gotcha. Right, and so that representation, and for those who are on camera didn't see, it's 20 to 30 people for the larger cities and 2 to 5 people for the smaller ones. That's what happens with our funding. And so it's easy for the city of Marshall, the city of Worthington, the city of Wilmer, the city of Morris, the city of Alexandria, the Mankato's of the world to get access to resources and funding, but yet the cities of Island and Maynard and Garvin are left behind. Now, working population-wise, those communities still come into our larger cities to work. But at the same time, when we're talking about building community, my town of 323 people, it's hard for them to get access to resources. What that looks like is driving 40 miles to go to a hospital, to go over to South Dakota because it's closer, and maybe in network for dentistry, for trying to find affordable housing, and affordable housing to the metro. Y'all might look at our house prices and be like, y'all haven't made. Okay, my income is less here, okay? So yes, our house is only $250,000, but my income is halved as well, so it's not quite the same. So the needs of Greater Minnesota are the same. It's just we have to remember that we exist. Number 2 need is people to listen, and that's not a Greater Minnesota issue either. When we're talking about gender-based violence, when we're talking about anti-racism, when we're talking about incarceration needs, people have been screaming at the top of their lungs for decades about these things, but instead we wait until Someone dumped money into a study to justify the allocation needs to address those issues. Generations after generations after generations have been begging for attention for these things. So as a community, we have to start listening to people and their self-identified needs in their communities to create these changes.
Thank you. I'll put in a plug, the Badass membership is about trying to connect all of the pieces of all of the people who are trying to work on these solutions, so that we can tell the stories at least to a wider audience. And then one of the other things I wanted to ask you was, we talked a bit about how do you build capacity? Because I think I asked you, do you feel hopeful or hopeless in a community like Marshall? You also mentioned there's been 2 homicides, gender-based violence homicides recently. Where do you see we're about, the Changemakers Alliance is about how are changemakers able to connect to make change happen? And do you feel that there's solutions?
I live with the hope that my ancestors have given me. I'm still here. Whether they were motivated by spite or love, I don't care, but I'm here. So I have radical hope and in the ability to make change in spaces. And seeing rooms like this of people hailing from all over the state of Minnesota give me hope that change can happen in my community. I feel honored and blessed to be on this stage with so many change makers and be around so many change makers, and knowing that I'm in my community with so many doers and movers and shakers who are committed to making the change in our lifetimes as far as that will go. In our community. So yeah, I feel hopeful. Capacity-wise, is there the capacity? No, but that's true for everyone here. We've heard multiple people talk about funding and allocation of resources and manpower and time. And at the same time, I think it's important to note that there's something to be said for not everyone has to be the doer. Not everyone has to be the me's who wear multiple hats and exist in multiple spaces. Sometimes doing is supporting, sometimes doing is speaking people into rooms before they get there. Sometimes doing is just using our social media and raising people up who are doing the work. Sometimes the doing is in referring. Our connection was literally based on that. So I feel hopeful because there's so many different avenues for people to connect and do the work, including joining the Changemakers Alliance. Mm-hmm.